So can a pastor have close friends, let alone close friends in their church? Today we look at that topic on Pastors on Porn. Welcome aboard. Well, last week we started speaking on this topic, the highway to harm, and it was inspired by the book 10 Warning Signs of a Leadership Crash by Stephen Mansfield. And the idea there is that there's this well-traveled highway that leads to crashes or harm, and there's these common road markers or route markers that are found over and over and over again in the lives of leaders who have experienced personal crashes. And last week I unpackaged one of those 10 signs that Mansfield identifies, a route marker that he identifies as choosing isolation. And in that podcast, we explored how pertinent this was to the area of focus, that being those of us who have struggled with unmanageable sexual behaviors, like things like porn. And the whole idea of this podcast, of course, is most of us identify with isolation. We ended up in isolation for all sorts of reasons. And last week we spoke about 3 of them that Mansfield gave. One of them could be because of our inflated view around our authority. The second one could be the personal life hurts we've got from this role that we carry out. And the last one was really just a simmering sense of shame because of our secret porn behaviors. Now today I want to unpackage another one. It's actually closely related to last week's. It's another route marker that Mansfield identifies, and this is what he calls losing, or I guess you could say not having, trusted friendships. And he starts his chapter with this powerful statement: the clearest indicator of a man's decline is the state of his friendships. Oh, wow. I mean, that should get your attention. The clearest indicator of a man's decline is the state of his friendships. And last week I spoke about how many guys can look back perhaps at college or Bible school or a time when they were younger and had a lot of close friends. Many people find, however, that they begin, or the numbers begin, to drop off as they age. So friends are a sign. So is the absence of friends. If a man is 30 and can't name a close friend, according to Mansfield, then he's already dysfunctional. It's not surprising then that the author goes on to say that by midlife, many men's friendships have dried up, and by the time he talks to people in their 50s and 60s, they often cannot name a single close friend. It could be that maybe you are advanced for your age, but I mean in a negative way. Watch your friendships. Just as an aside here, it's interesting. Maybe there are some cultural factors at play. I'm just wondering, I coach some guys, some of the guys I coach are in Australia. It's always fun to try to work out our time differences. But I talked to a guy I'm coaching with that grew up, he's an American, he grew up in the States, and now he lives in Australia. He has spent pretty much the last 20, 30 years of his life in Australia. And I asked him, what are some of the cultural differences you see between living in the United States and living in Australia? And I found his answer fascinating. He said in Australia, there seems to be a much higher emphasis on your mates and being with your mates than where he grew up in the States. It's just an interesting comment. Now, I'm not saying that everybody in Australia has close friends, but the whole idea here is that we need to move beyond friendships as simply an aspirational option. Now, one thing Mansfield isn't really super positive about is accountability or recovery accountability relationships as fitting the bill for friendships. And I personally think he's got that one wrong. I think us men, we need to start somewhere, especially when our addictive struggles have led us into isolation. Sometimes it can be our common pressing struggle is an on-ramp to new or ongoing friendships. In fact, many of the closest friendships that I've found have been through recovery groups. I don't think it's a surprise that some people have seen them almost like foxhole friendships. There's a reason why war buddies, now they're getting really old from World War II or Vietnam or Afghanistan. There's a reason why they get together for the next 20, 30, 40 years. Because being in the trenches together does bring you closer. I don't think I'm going to get a lot of pushback from any of you by saying to watch your friendships and you need intimate friends. But where I may get pushback, where I probably would get pushback, is to say you should purpose to have also friends within the church that you pastor as well. Now, I'm going to be honest here. My reflexive, emotional response to having friendships in the church is to say no. Now, why do my reactions want to take me there? Well, it's simple. My hurts and bad experiences would tell me no. It's not worth it, and the potential pain it can bring. By the way, I think last week I shared about how I received a really angry phone call from somebody I had journeyed with. And I think it's just important to bring that up to date. I have since heard from that person who has tearfully apologized for the hurtful things they had said. So, those things happen as well. Not everybody apologizes, but you know what? There are just many potential painful situations in the church. I've had my share, and so have you if you have been in ministry for any length of time. Sometimes in my heightened moments of self-pity, and I have heightened moments of self-pity, usually on Mondays. I don't know what it is with Mondays, because I usually take Mondays. I've taken Mondays off, and there's something about Mondays when I would mow the lawn. And I would be out. No, I'm not mowing now because of the time of year, but I would be out mowing the lawn, and just this feeling of self-pity, would come over me, usually replaced quickly by anger. And sometimes in these moments, I have this image of the Old Testament story when God's finger begins to write on the wall to confront Nebuchadnezzar. I think it's Meeny Tekel Parsons or something. And now what God was saying to Nebuchadnezzar was, "You have been measured in my scales and found wanting." I think there was something more than that, but that was the start of it. It's one thing when God writes that on the wall of your heart, but when people write that on your heart, people write that on your whiteboard that you have been measured in their scales and found wanting, it hurts real bad. Whenever it comes from somebody you love and care for and have traveled with for years. So, the first reason I don't really want to have friendships within my church is simply the risk. I want to pull back from risking new friendships because new friendships also come with the potential of risking new hurt. But you know what? If I was really honest in looking back at the 20, 30 years of ministry, some of the greatest sources of hope and encouragement have come from friends within the church. Like my buddy Graham, I'm going to call him out by name if this ever gets to you, Graham, who encouraged me in a time of incredible self-doubt and discouragement, who told me, "You are a good pastor. You do love people. You do display wisdom and steadfastness. Hang in there. In all fairness, the good has come with the bad." So the first reason I'm not real, I just recognize that I'd pull back from intimate friendships within my church circles are the potential risk of new pain. But I think it's also important to point out here, and I think I've read a lot of church growth experts over the year, and kind of the common sense I got from them was that it was a bad idea. I personally have less and less affinity for some of the church growth stuff as I get older, that I cut my teeth on for so many years. I guess it just hasn't rung true for me long term, or seemed healthy for me, or as I look at the churches, I haven't seen a lot of healthy results in people's lives. Let me just take the classic line. Here's the classic line from church growth stuff. Pastors of large churches need to be ranchers as opposed to shepherds. That line is just a great way to absolve yourself and keep people at arm's length. And now you have a great rationale for doing it. Another great line. Well, it's not like I can be friends with everybody in the church. If you've got a larger church, it's not like I can be friends with everybody, which means I really shouldn't be friends with anybody in the church. And I recently had an email sent to me by, one of those church growth gurus who the kind that only interview the movers and shakers, the podcasts. By the way, I sometimes want to have somebody interviewed on one of those podcasts to be introduced as, here is Pastor Bill. He has steadily, even spectacularly shrunk his church. And I would just love to hear that kind of thing now that I have that off my chest. I just have come to realize that some of the advice that I was given is not healthy in a long term. Anyways, that newsletter, what it said was, most people build relationships. Most people in your church, if you're the pastor, build relationships with you for reasons other than pure friendships. In other words, they want to be close to you because you are the leader, not because they want to be your friend. Or to put another way, your friendship is positional, not relational. Well, let me push back for a minute on that. I have met people like that. That's true. I have, people like that are usually the ones who are trying to curry favor with you. They're offering, they want you to use their possessions and stay at their places, and they're trying to curry favor and proximity with you. But I think over time, you see their brokenness. It's pretty clear. It comes out. But I have many people that's not the case with in the church. And, over this last couple of years where I have stepped sideways or back and passed on the senior leadership role to another couple, it hasn't changed many of my relationships. Now, in all fairness, this author and newsletter said that true friendships endure when the position doesn't. I just think he sets people up to discount the possibilities of real friendships with people that you live with and work with on a regular basis. Now, let me tell you about a book that I've read recently, which I think makes, for me, a much more powerful and convincing statement about friendships within the local church and within people that you know. The book is entitled What Great Ministry Leaders Get Right. It's by Jimmy Dodd and Renaud van der Wright. I might be pronouncing his name wrong. And the book is all about core competencies that need to be in place if we are to succeed in our calling. Now, there's a lot of them, and sometimes I think that gets discouraging because you're going, how could I possibly be good at all of these core competencies? But that aside, one of the things that the authors emphasize, and you got it, chapter 7, intimate friendships. And the author starts out by talking about some life advice he received from a life mentor that he's now come to vehemently disagree with, he says. And the author is getting counseling or advice, and he's telling his mentor that he frequently takes part of his vacation with people from his church, to which his mentor tells him that is a major mistake. The mentor cautions him against having friendships, especially close friendships with people in the church. Well, why is that? Well, because of things like jealousy among church members, hints of favoritism, the vulnerability that could happen when those people see him backstage or off the stage kind of thing. And, so this is the advice that he's given. And what happens here is the author thinks about that and he says, you know what? He thought about it. He wrestled with it. And he says he just didn't buy it. And because what he says is this: whatever risks that come from having friendships with people in the church, they are far less than the risks that come from distance and isolations. Things we spoke about in the last podcast. Now, I'm not saying that I am going to begin to take all my vacations, me and my wife, with other people that we know. I'm not saying that fills me with a lot of great energy. I'm a borderline introvert. My wife is even far more so. So that's probably not good advice for us personally. But let me just say this: the idea of having no close friends in your daily space is perilous. His point is this: proximity matters. Let me quote him. And this is interesting because he was talking about other people having functional relationships. He turns us on to pastors. He says far too many leaders practice functional friendships rather than intimate ones. Or they only have close friends outside their regular orbit. These are not the friendships you need most. They go on to say it's a good thing to have friendships with people in your church, even people on your staff. Now, I recognize that sometimes you have to wear different hats. I've had friends, and sometimes I've had to specifically say to them, I have different hats in this relationship. Right now, I am taking off my friend hat, and I'm going to put on my boss hat, and I've just had to say that. But if you've chosen the right people for your staff, if you've chosen the right people you work with, then there should be that level of maturity. Let me just say in closing, the author of this book, all about core competencies, ends with this challenge and plea. And I want to end with this. He says it probably best. He says, most leaders avoid intimate friendship. He says, I want you to climb out of this book, and I beg you and dare you to develop close friendships in your church. Do it, and do it now. We'll see you next week.